The day was cold, colder than it should have been for early October. Gray clouds hung low in the sky, heavy with rain that refused to fall. Maplewood Cemetery sat quietly on the edge of town, its headstones weathered by time and neglect. Today, though it wasn't empty, a small group of people had gathered there, huddled together under the gloomy heavens. They were dressed in dark clothes, their expressions grim as they stood near a freshly dug grave. At the center of everything was Linda Carter. She stood beside the polished wooden coffin, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. She hadn't cried much since hearing the news about her son's death. Maybe it was because she still couldn't believe it, or maybe it was because crying wouldn't bring him back. Either way, she felt numb, a kind of numbness that made every sound around her feel distant, muffled, like she was underwater. Daniel. Her boy. He'd always been so full of life, so full of energy. It didn't make sense that he could just leave. Not like this. Not in a car accident. The police said it happened late at night when Daniel lost control of his vehicle on a slick road. They found the wreckage hours later, crumpled against a tree. But something about their explanation didn't sit right with Linda. She couldn't put her finger on it, but there was a nagging feeling in the pit of her stomach, a feeling that told her something wasn't quite right. The pastor cleared his throat, pulling Linda out of her thoughts. He stood next to the coffin, holding a Bible in one hand. His voice carried softly over the quiet murmurs of the crowd. "We are gathered here today to remember Daniel Carter," he began, his tone solemn. "A son, a friend, a bright light taken from us far too soon." Linda listened half-heartedly, her gaze drifting back to the coffin. It was beautiful, really. The wood gleamed under the dim light, polished to perfection. White roses rested on top, their petals soft and delicate. Someone had gone to great lengths to make sure everything looked perfect, and yet none of it mattered. None of it would bring Daniel back. Around her, people whispered condolences. "I'm so sorry for your loss," one woman said, placing a gentle hand on Linda's shoulder. Another man nodded sympathetically, his hat held respectfully in his hands. Linda forced herself to nod back, to thank them, even though the words felt hollow. These people cared, she knew that. But how could they understand? How could anyone understand what it felt like to lose a child? Her husband, Robert, stood a few feet away. His face was red, his jaw clenched tight. He hadn't said much since the accident either. Grief hit everyone differently, and for Robert it came out as anger. Anger at the world, at fate, at whatever higher power had decided to take their son away. Linda wished she could comfort him, but she didn't know where to start. She could barely keep herself together. When the pastor finished speaking, he closed the Bible and stepped aside. The crowd grew silent, waiting for someone to say something. Anything. Linda realized they were looking at her. They expected her to speak, to share memories of Daniel, to say goodbye one last time. But she couldn't do it. She couldn't stand there and pretend that any of this was okay. Instead, she moved forward. Slowly, deliberately, she approached the coffin. Her heart pounded in her chest as she reached out and touched the smooth surface of the lid. For a moment she hesitated. What if opening it made things worse? What if seeing Daniel's face broke her completely? But then again, what choice did she have? This was her son, her baby. She needed to see him one more time. Ignoring the whispers that rippled through the crowd, Linda pushed the lid open and froze. Inside the coffin lay a body, but it wasn't Daniel's, at least not the Daniel she knew. The figure before her looked wrong. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, with cracks running across it like fine lines on old china. Its eyes were sunken, black pits that seemed to stare into nothingness. There was no warmth, no humanity left in it. It was something else. Linda stumbled backward, her breath catching in her throat. Her vision blurred as tears welled up in her eyes. No, this couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of mistake, some cruel joke played by someone who didn't understand how much pain she was already in. "What is this?" she managed to choke out, turning to face the crowd. Her voice trembled, but there was steel in it now. Steel born of desperation and disbelief. "Where is my son?" No one answered. Instead, they stared at her, their faces pale and drawn. Some covered their mouths with their hands, while others exchanged uneasy glances. Even the pastor looked shaken, his Bible forgotten in his hands. Robert rushed to Linda's side, grabbing her arm to steady her. "What's going on?" he demanded, his voice rising. "Harper, what the hell is this?" Mr. Harper, the funeral director, stepped forward nervously. He was a tall, thin man with glasses perched on the end of his nose. Normally calm and professional, he now looked flustered, almost panicked. "Mrs. Carter, I don't know what to say," he stammered. That's not supposed to be there. I swear I prepared Daniel's body myself. This isn't right." "Then whose body is it?" Robert snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Harper shook his head, clearly at a loss. "I don't know, I've never seen anything like this before." The crowd erupted into murmurs, their voices overlapping as panic began to spread. People backed away from the coffin, some crossing themselves, others muttering prayers under their breath. Linda stood frozen, unable to look away from the grotesque figure inside. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Was this some kind of prank? A mix-up at the morgue? Or was it something else entirely? As the chaos unfolded around her, Linda felt a strange sensation wash over her. It started in her chest and spread outward, filling her with a mixture of dread and determination. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't her son. And if it wasn't her son, then there was only one conclusion. Daniel might still be alive. She turned to Robert, her eyes blazing with newfound resolve. "We need answers," she said firmly. "Now." The drive home from the cemetery was silent. Linda sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window without really seeing anything. Her mind replayed the scene over and over again. The coffin opening, the strange body inside, the shocked faces of everyone around her. She couldn't shake the feeling that something far bigger was going on, something she didn't fully understand yet. But one thing was clear. Whatever was in that coffin wasn't Daniel. And if it wasn't Daniel, then where was he? Robert gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. He hadn't said much since leaving the funeral, but Linda could tell he was angry. Angry at the world, angry at whoever had done this, maybe even angry at her for causing such a scene. But beneath the anger there was fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of what might have happened to their son. When they finally pulled into the driveway, Linda didn't wait for Robert to turn off the engine. She opened the car door and stepped out, her legs unsteady beneath her. The house felt empty without Daniel's laughter echoing through its walls. Every corner seemed to remind her of him. The jacket he'd left hanging by the door, the sneakers kicked off near the stairs, the guitar propped up against the living room couch. Linda walked straight to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. Her hands trembled so badly that some of it spilled onto the counter. She set the glass down and leaned against the sink, taking deep breaths. What now? How could they find answers when nothing made sense? That's when she remembered Dr. Emily Ross. Emily was the coroner who had handled Daniel's autopsy. If anyone knew something about what had happened to her son's body, it would be her. Without wasting another second, Linda grabbed the phone and dialed the number she'd saved after the accident. It rang 3 times before someone picked up. "Hello?" came a cautious voice on the other end. "Dr. Ross, this is Linda Carter," Linda said quickly, cutting straight to the point. "I need to talk to you, it's urgent." There was a pause. "Mrs. Carter, I'm sorry, but I've already filed the report. There isn't much more I can do." "I know," Linda replied, her voice trembling. "But something's wrong, something terrible. Please, I need to see you." Another pause, longer this time. Then, reluctantly, Emily agreed. "All right, come to my office tomorrow morning, we'll talk." The next day, Linda arrived at the coroner's office early, her nerves stretched thin. The building was tucked away in a quiet part of town, surrounded by trees that swayed gently in the breeze. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of antiseptic. Linda approached the front desk where a young receptionist greeted her with a polite smile. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked. "I'm here to see Dr. Ross," Linda said. "She's expecting me." The receptionist nodded and buzzed her through. Linda followed the sound of footsteps down a narrow hallway until she reached a small office. Emily stood waiting for her, dressed in scrubs and looking every bit as tired as Linda felt. Her dark hair was tied back into a messy ponytail, and her eyes were shadowy with exhaustion. "Mrs. Carter," Emily said, gesturing for Linda to sit. "What's going on?" Linda took a seat across from her, clutching her purse tightly in her lap. For a moment she hesitated, unsure of how to begin. Then she plunged ahead, telling Emily everything: the strange body in the coffin, the whispers at the funeral, the growing suspicion that Daniel might still be alive. Emily listened intently, her brow furrowing deeper with each word. When Linda finished, the coroner sighed heavily and leaned back in her chair. "I wish I could tell you I have all the answers," she said, "but I don't. All I can do is show you what I have." She stood and walked over to a filing cabinet, pulling out a folder marked with Daniel's name. Opening it, she spread several documents across the desk. Linda leaned forward, scanning them eagerly. There were photos of Daniel's injuries, notes detailing the cause of death, and official paperwork confirming the completion of the autopsy. But something caught Linda's eye almost immediately. One of the forms stated that Daniel's body had been cremated, not buried. Her heart skipped a beat. "Wait," she said, pointing at the paper. "This says Daniel was cremated. So why was there a body in the coffin?" Emily frowned, picking up the form and examining it closely. "That's odd," she admitted. "I mean, yes, we did prepare the body for cremation, but according to these records—" She trailed off, flipping through the pages. "It looks like someone changed the order. Someone requested the remains be sent to a funeral home instead." "Who?" Linda demanded, her voice rising. "Who changed the order?" Emily shook her head. "I don't know. These forms are signed by someone else, an administrator maybe. I wasn't involved in that part of the process." Linda felt a surge of frustration. This was supposed to be the answer, the key to finding Daniel. Instead, it only raised more questions. Who had tampered with the records? And why? "There's something else," Emily added hesitantly. She reached into the folder again and pulled out a photograph. It showed a close-up of Daniel's chest where a large incision had been made during the autopsy. But something about the wound looked off. The edges weren't clean. They were jagged, uneven, almost like they hadn't been made by a scalpel. "What is that?" Linda whispered, staring at the picture. "I'm not sure," Emily admitted. "At first I thought it was just poor stitching, but now I'm starting to wonder if it was deliberate, like someone wanted us to think Daniel died naturally, but..." "But what?" Linda pressed. Emily hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Like someone wanted to cover up what really happened to him. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and ominous. Linda felt a chill run down her spine. If Emily was right, then Daniel's death hadn't been an accident. It had been staged, which meant he might still be out there somewhere, alive, or worse. Linda stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Thank you," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "Thank you for telling me this." Emily nodded, though her expression remained troubled. "Be careful, Mrs. Carter. Whoever's behind this, they're dangerous." As Linda left the office, her mind raced. She needed to keep digging, to find out who had taken Daniel and why. But where could she start? Who could she trust? Back. At home, Linda sat alone in the living room, staring at the stack of papers Emily had given her. She flipped through them absently, searching for any clue she might have missed. That's when she noticed something, a name written in small print, at the bottom of one of the forms. Ryan Hughes, investigator. Her heart leapt. Maybe this was it. Maybe this man could help her. Without hesitation, Linda grabbed the phone and dialed the number listed beside the name. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "Hughes here. Mr. Hughes." Linda began, her voice shaking slightly. "My name is Linda Carter. I think you might be able to help me." There was a pause on the other end. Then, cautiously, Ryan replied, "Tell me what's going on." And so Linda told him everything, from the fake body in the coffin to the suspicious autopsy report. As she spoke, she could hear the sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. When she finished, Ryan let out a low whistle. "You're not the first person to come to me with a story like this," he said grimly. "Something big is happening, Mrs. Carter. Bigger than you realize. Meet me tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. I'll explain everything then." Relief washed over Linda, mixed with a flicker of hope. Finally, she wasn't alone in this fight. Whatever lay ahead, she was ready to face it, for Daniel. The diner was quiet, save for the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead and the occasional clink of dishes from the kitchen. It was late, and most of the patrons had already left, leaving only a few scattered customers nursing cups of coffee or staring blankly at their phones. Linda sat in a corner booth, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug of tea that had long gone cold. Across from her was Ryan Hughes, the investigator she'd spoken to on the phone. He was dressed casually, but looked like someone who spent more time solving problems than sitting still. His jacket was worn, his boots scuffed, and his eyes carried a weight that suggested he'd seen too much. Ryan spread out a series of documents and photos on the table between them. They were grainy images taken from security cameras, along with handwritten notes and printed emails. "I know this looks messy," he said, pushing a strand of dark hair out of his face. "But trust me, there's a pattern here." Linda leaned forward, her heart pounding as she studied the materials. Each photo showed different people, some young, some older, but all shared one thing in common. They had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, just like Daniel. Some of the cases dated back years, others only weeks. What chilled her most was the similarity in the details. Bodies replaced with fakes, funeral homes involved, records altered. "This isn't random," Ryan continued, tapping a finger on one of the photos. "Whoever's doing this has resources, money, connections, and they're covering their tracks carefully." "But why?" Linda asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would anyone go to such lengths? What do they want with these people?" Ryan hesitated, as if debating how much to tell her. Finally, he sighed and leaned back in the booth. "That's the part I'm still trying to figure out. But based on what I've seen so far," he paused, his gaze locking onto hers. "It's not just about kidnapping. It's about experimentation." "Experimentation?" Linda repeated, her stomach twisting into knots. "You mean, like medical experiments?" "Not exactly," Ryan replied grimly. "More like genetic manipulation, or worse." He pulled up an image on his laptop, a blurry video clip showing a group of figures in hazmat suits moving quickly inside what looked like a laboratory. "These are snippets I managed to recover from hacked files. Whoever's behind this is playing God. Changing DNA, creating hybrids, maybe even testing alien tech. I don't have all the answers yet, but it's clear they're using the missing people as test subjects." Linda felt a wave of nausea wash over her. The thought of Daniel being subjected to such horrors was unbearable. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay focused. "How do we stop them?" she demanded. "Where do we start?" Ryan tapped another photo, one of a building surrounded by tall fences and security cameras. "This facility," he said. "It's where they're keeping the victims, or at least it's one of their locations. If we can get inside, we might be able to find your son and expose whoever's pulling the strings." Linda stared at the picture, her mind racing. Breitinger. Into a heavily guarded facility sounded impossible, but she didn't care. She'd do whatever it took to bring Daniel home. "When do we go?" she asked firmly. Ryan raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by her determination. "We need to plan this carefully," he warned. "One wrong move and we'll end up dead or, worse, captured. We'll need backup supplies and a way to cover our tracks." "I don't care about the risks," Linda shot back. "My son is in there. I'm not leaving without him." Ryan studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right," he said. "If you're serious, we'll do this together, but listen to me. You follow my lead. No heroics, got it?" Linda nodded, though her mind was already racing ahead. Over the next hour, Ryan outlined a basic plan. They would gather intelligence first, learning as much as they could about the facility's layout and security measures. Then, they'd find a way to sneak in undetected. It wouldn't be easy, but it was their best shot. As they left the diner, the rain had picked up, soaking the streets and reflecting the neon lights in shimmering puddles. Linda climbed into Ryan's truck, her thoughts swirling. For the first time since Daniel's disappearance, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could pull this off. Later that night, back at her house, Linda couldn't sleep. She paced the living room, going over everything Ryan had told her. Her husband, Robert, watched her from the couch, concern etched on his face. "Are you sure about this?" he asked finally. "This guy, he's practically a stranger. How do you know you can trust him?" "I don't," Linda admitted. "But I don't have a choice. If there's even a chance Daniel's alive, I have to take it." Robert sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "What if something happens to you? What if you walk into a trap?" "I'll be careful," Linda promised. "Ryan knows what he's doing, and besides—" She paused, her voice breaking slightly. "I can't just sit here and do nothing." Robert didn't argue further. Instead, he stood and pulled her into a tight hug. "Just promise me you'll come back," he murmured. "I will," Linda whispered, though she wasn't entirely sure she believed it herself. The next morning, Linda met Ryan at a gas station on the outskirts of town. He handed her a duffel bag filled with tools, flashlights, and a small handgun. "For emergencies," he explained, when she gave him a skeptical look. "Hopefully we won't need it." They drove in silence, the tension growing thicker with each passing mile. The facility was located deep in the woods, far from prying eyes. As they approached, Linda felt her nerves tighten. The place looked like something out of a nightmare. Rows of barbed wire fencing, guard towers looming in the distance, and floodlights illuminating every inch of the perimeter. Ryan parked the truck a safe distance away and turned to her. "Remember the plan," he said. "Stay low, stick to the shadows, and don't make a sound. Once we're inside, we split up. You head for the holding cells, I'll handle the control room." "What if I find Daniel?" Linda asked, her voice trembling. "Get him out," Ryan replied simply. "No matter what." With that, they slipped out of the truck and began their approach. The rain had stopped, but the ground was slick with mud, making every step treacherous. They moved cautiously, avoiding the beams of light that swept across the area. When they reached the fence, Ryan produced a pair of bolt cutters and went to work, his movement swift and precise. Once they were through, they crouched low and darted toward the building. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant bark of a dog, made Linda's heart race. She kept imagining guards appearing out of nowhere, guns drawn, ready to shoot. But somehow they made it to the side entrance without incident. Ryan disabled the lock with practiced ease, and they slipped inside. The air was cool and sterile, carrying the faint scent of chemicals. The hallways were eerily silent, lined with doors marked with cryptic labels. Linda followed Ryan as they split up, her breath shallow, her pulse hammering in her ears. She moved quickly, checking each door she passed. Most were locked, but eventually she found one that opened. Inside, she froze. Rows of tanks filled with green liquid stretched before her, their contents obscured by condensation. In one tank, suspended in stasis, was a figure that made her blood run cold. It was Daniel. Alive, but unconscious. Tubes and wires snaked around his body, connecting him to machines that beeped softly in the background. Tears welled up in Linda's eyes as she rushed to the tank, pressing her hands against the glass. "Daniel," she whispered hoarsely. "I'm here. Mommy's here." But before she could figure out how to free him, a loud alarm blared through the facility, shattering the silence. Red lights flashed, and heavy footsteps echoed in the distance. Linda spun around, panic gripping her chest. They'd been discovered. The sound of the alarm was deafening, reverberating through the cold, sterile halls of the facility like a scream. Linda's heart pounded in her chest as she turned back to Daniel, her hands trembling as they fumbled with the tubes and wires attached to his body. Each second felt like an eternity, but she forced herself to focus. She couldn't lose him now, not when he was so close. "Daniel," she whispered urgently, tears streaming down her face. "Wake up, sweetheart. Please." But Daniel didn't stir. His eyes remained closed, his breathing shallow and uneven. Linda worked quickly, yanking at the wires connected to his arms and chest. One by one, they came loose, sparking faintly as they disconnected from the machines. Finally, she reached for the latch on the tank, her fingers slipping on the slick surface. With a grunt of effort, she pulled it open, and the green liquid spilled out onto the floor, pooling around her feet. She reached inside and grabbed Daniel under his arms, dragging him out of the tank. He was heavier than she expected, his limp body unresponsive as she struggled to lift him. Her muscles burned with exertion, but she refused to give up. "Come on," she muttered through gritted teeth. "We're getting out of here." Behind her, the sound of boots pounding against the tiled floor grew louder. Guards were coming, fast. Linda glanced over her shoulder just in time to see two men in black uniforms burst into the room, their weapons raised. They shouted something, their voices drowned out by the blaring alarm, but Linda didn't wait to hear what they had to say. Clutching Daniel tightly, she ducked behind one of the nearby tanks, using it as cover. The guards fired, their bullets ricocheting off the glass, with sharp cracks. Shards exploded into the air, raining down on Linda and Daniel. She shielded him with her body, wincing as tiny fragments of glass bit into her skin. Her mind raced, searching for a way out. There had to be another exit. There always was. Then, she remembered Ryan. Where was he? Had he been caught? Or worse? She pushed the thought aside. Right now, all that mattered was getting Daniel to safety. If Ryan was still alive, he'd find them. If not, well, she couldn't think about that right now. Peering around the edge of the tank, Linda spotted a door on the far side of the room. It looked like it led to a service corridor, narrow and dimly lit, but hopefully less guarded. She tightened her grip on Daniel and took a deep breath. This was going to hurt. On 3, she bolted, half dragging, half carrying Daniel across the room. Bullets whizzed past her, striking the floor and walls with loud pings. Adrenaline surged through her veins, giving her strength she didn't know she had. She reached the door and slammed her shoulder against it, pushing it open just wide enough to squeeze through. The corridor beyond was eerily quiet compared to the chaos behind her. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows along the walls. Linda paused for a moment, catching her breath and listening for any signs of pursuit. So far, so good, but she knew it wouldn't last long. She adjusted Daniel's weight on her shoulders and began moving again, sticking close to the wall. Every step sent waves of pain shooting through her legs, but she ignored it. She couldn't stop, not until they were safe. As she rounded a corner, she nearly collided with someone. Instinctively, she recoiled, ready to fight or run, but then she recognized the figure. It was Ryan. "Linda," he hissed, grabbing her arm to steady her. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she snapped, though her voice trembled. "But we need to go. Now." Ryan nodded, taking in the sight of Daniel slung over her shoulder. "Let me help," he said, reaching for him. Together, they managed to carry Daniel more efficiently, splitting his weight between them. They moved quickly, following Ryan's lead as he navigated the labyrinthine corridors. Along the way, they passed rooms filled with strange equipment, rows of computers, shelves stacked with vials of glowing liquid, and monitors displaying incomprehensible data. Whatever this place was, it wasn't just a lab. It was something far darker. At one point, they heard voices ahead and ducked into a side room to avoid detection. Inside, Linda saw rows of tanks similar to the one Daniel had been in. Only these tanks weren't empty. Suspended within them were other people, young men and women, their faces pale and lifeless, their bodies connected to the same machines that had held Daniel captive. Some of them stirred faintly, their eyes fluttering, as if trying to wake up. Linda stared at them, her stomach churning. Who were they? What had been done to them? And could they still be saved? We can't stay here, Ryan whispered urgently, tugging at her sleeve. They'll find us. Reluctantly, Linda tore her gaze away and followed him back into the hallway. They pressed on, their pace quickening as the sounds of pursuit grew closer. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached a stairwell leading to the ground floor. Ryan pushed open the door and they descended, their footsteps echoing loudly in the confined space. When they emerged into the night air, Linda almost collapsed with relief. The rain had started again, drenching them instantly, but she didn't care. They were outside. They were free. Or so she thought. Before they could make it to the tree line, headlights pierced through the darkness. A convoy of black SUVs roared into view, skidding to a halt in front of them. Doors flew open and armed men poured out, surrounding them in seconds. Ryan cursed under his breath, raising his hands slowly. "Drop your weapon," one of the men barked, leveling a rifle at him. Linda clutched Daniel tighter, refusing to let go. "No," she said, her voice shaking but defiant. "You're not taking him again." For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The guards hesitated, unsure how to proceed. Then, from behind them, a new voice cut through the tension. "That won't be necessary." A man stepped forward, dressed in a crisp suit despite the pouring rain. His face was calm, almost amused as he surveyed the scene. "Mrs. Carter," he said smoothly, his tone dripping with false sympathy. "You've caused quite a disturbance, but don't worry, we're here to help." "Help?" Linda spat, her anger boiling over. "You call this helping? You kidnapped my son. You experimented on him." The man smiled thinly, unfazed by her outburst. "Your son is special, Mrs. Carter. He has potential. Potential that could change the world. All we did was unlock it." "You're monsters?" Linda hissed, clutching Daniel even tighter. The man sighed, as if disappointed by her lack of understanding. "Take them," he ordered, gesturing to the guards. "And bring the boy. We're not done with him yet." Linda braced herself, ready to fight, but Ryan intervened. "Don't," he murmured, his voice low. "Not yet. Wait for the right moment." Confused but trusting him, Linda allowed the guards to lead them toward the waiting vehicles. As they shoved her into the back seat of an SUV, she caught Ryan's eye. He gave her a subtle nod and she understood. This wasn't over. Not yet. The convoy sped off into the night, leaving the facility, and whatever horrors lay within, behind. But, as Linda sat there holding Daniel close, she vowed one thing. No matter what happened next, she would never stop fighting for her son. The ride was silent except for the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers battling the relentless rain. Linda sat stiffly in the back seat of the SUV, her arms wrapped tightly around Daniel. His head rested against her shoulder, his breathing shallow, but steady. She could feel the warmth of his body, a small reassurance that he was still alive. But every jolt of the vehicle sent fresh waves of fear coursing through her. Where were they taking him? What did these people want? Across from her, Ryan sat quietly, his eyes darting between the two armed guards flanking the doors. His face was calm, almost too calm, as if he were planning something. Linda caught his gaze briefly and saw a flicker of determination. Whatever he had in mind, she trusted him, at least for now. One of the guards shifted uncomfortably, his rifle resting lazily across his lap. He glanced at Linda and Daniel, then muttered under his breath to his partner. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he said, his voice low but audible. "They weren't supposed to find us." His partner shrugged, unimpressed. "Orders are orders. Just keep your eyes open." Linda's heart sank. These men didn't seem particularly loyal to whoever was running this operation. Maybe that meant there was a weakness they could exploit. She leaned closer to Ryan, pretending to adjust Daniel's position, and whispered, "What's the plan?" Ryan didn't look at her directly. Instead, he casually shifted his weight, letting his fingers brush against something hidden in his pocket. It was small, a keycard or some kind of electronic device, but it gave Linda hope. "We wait," he murmured softly. "When the moment comes, follow my lead." She nodded slightly, trying to stay calm. Her grip tightened on Daniel as the SUV turned sharply onto a rough dirt road. The tires splashed through puddles, jostling everyone inside. Through the rain-streaked windows, Linda could see nothing but dense trees and darkness. They were heading deeper into the wilderness, away from any chance of help. After what felt like an eternity, the convoy finally slowed to a stop. The guards exchanged glances before one of them opened the door and stepped out. Cold air rushed into the vehicle, carrying the earthy smell of wet soil. Ryan tensed visibly, his hand gripping the edge of the seat. "Out!" the guard barked, gesturing with his rifle. Linda hesitated, clutching Daniel tighter. She didn't want to leave the relative safety of the SUV, but she knew they had no choice. Slowly, she slid out of the vehicle, careful not to let go of her son. Ryan followed close behind, his movements deliberate. The rain soaked them instantly, plastering hair to foreheads and weighing down clothes. They were in a clearing surrounded by towering pine trees. In the center stood a large metal structure, a makeshift facility, its walls gleaming dully in the stormy light. Armed men patrolled the perimeter, their flashlights cutting through the rain like blades. Linda's stomach churned. This place looked worse than the last one. "Move," another guard ordered, prodding Ryan with the barrel of his gun. As they walked toward the building, Ryan subtly slipped the keycard into his palm. He glanced at Linda again, his eyes locking, onto hers for just a second. Then, without warning, he acted. With lightning speed, Ryan drove his elbow into the nearest guard's throat, knocking him backward. Before the man could react, Ryan snatched his rifle and swung it around, aiming it at the other guard. "Drop your weapons," he shouted, his voice cutting through the rain. The second guard froze, clearly unsure how to respond. Behind them, chaos erupted as more men noticed the commotion and began converging on their position. Linda didn't waste time. Using the distraction, she dragged Daniel toward the tree line, her legs burning with effort. She could hear gunfire erupting behind her, but she refused to look back. "Linda!" Ryan called out, his voice strained. "Keep going." She obeyed, stumbling over roots and rocks as she pushed deeper into the forest. The rain made everything slippery, and her muscles screamed in protest, but she pressed on. After several minutes, she collapsed behind a thick tree trunk, gasping for breath. Daniel lay beside her, still unconscious but alive. For a moment, all she could hear was the sound of her own ragged breathing and the pounding rain. Then, faintly, she heard footsteps crunching through the underbrush. Panic surged through her, and she braced herself, ready to fight or run again. But instead of a guard, Ryan appeared, bloodied but alive. "Come on," he panted, helping her to her feet. "We're not safe yet." Together, they continued their desperate flight, weaving through the trees until the sounds of pursuit faded into the distance. Eventually, they reached a narrow dirt path that led downhill. At the bottom, barely visible through the sheets of rain, was an old abandoned cabin. "This will have to do," Ryan said, motioning toward it. "We can hide here until we figure out our next move." Linda nodded too, exhausted to argue. With Ryan's help, she carried Daniel inside and laid him gently on the dusty floor. The cabin was cold and damp, but it offered shelter from the storm. For now, that was enough. Ryan barricaded the door with pieces of broken furniture while Linda checked Daniel's condition. His pulse was weak but steady, and his skin felt clammy to the touch. She brushed his hair away from his forehead, tears streaming down her face. "Hold on, sweetheart," she whispered. "We'll get you home." Ryan joined her a few moments later, his expression grim. "Listen," he said, crouching beside her. "I don't know what those people did to him, but whatever it is, it's not natural. When he wakes up, he might be different." Linda stared at him, her heart sinking. "Different how?" "I don't know," Ryan admitted. "But we need to prepare for anything. If they were experimenting on him, there's no telling what changes they made." Linda swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay strong. "Then we'll deal with it together. No matter what happens, I'm not losing him again." Ryan nodded, respect flickering in his eyes. All right, let's rest for a bit. We've got a long road ahead of us. Outside, the rain continued to pour, masking the distant hum of approaching vehicles. Somewhere out there, the people who had taken Daniel were searching for them. But for now, Linda allowed herself a moment of quiet. She held Daniel's hand tightly, vowing silently to protect him no matter the cost. As the storm raged on, the three of them huddled together in the tiny cabin, clinging to hope and each other. The cabin was quiet except for the sound of rain tapping against the roof. Linda sat beside Daniel, her hand resting gently on his forehead. He hadn't woken up yet, but his breathing had grown stronger, steadier. She tried to focus on that, on the fact that he was alive, but her mind kept drifting to what Ryan had said. Different. What did it mean? Would Daniel still be her son when he opened his eyes? Ryan paced the small space, his boots creaking softly on the wooden floor. Every now and then he glanced out the cracked window, scanning the dark forest for signs of pursuit. So far they were safe, but both of them knew it wouldn't last forever. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. Time felt strange in the cramped, shadowy cabin. Finally, Daniel stirred. His eyelids flickered and a soft groan escaped his lips. Linda froze, her heart leaping into her throat. "Daniel?" she whispered, leaning closer. "Can you hear me?" His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then locking onto hers. For a moment, relief washed over her. He was awake. He was here. But then she noticed something odd. His irises glowed faintly, a pale silver light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. "Mom?" Daniel's voice was weak, barely audible over the rain, but it was unmistakably his. Linda choked back tears and pulled him into a tight embrace. "I'm here, sweetheart, I've got you." Daniel winced slightly, pulling away just enough to look at her. Where am I? What happened?" "It's okay," Linda said quickly, brushing damp strands of hair from his face. "You're safe now. We'll explain everything later." Ryan stepped forward, his expression cautious but kind. "Hey, kid," he said softly. "How are you feeling?" "I don't know," Daniel admitted, his voice trembling. He looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers as if testing them. Then his brow furrowed, confusion clouding his features. "Something feels wrong." Linda exchanged a worried glance with Ryan. Neither of them spoke, unsure of how much to tell him or how he'd react. Before anyone could say anything else, a loud noise outside startled them all. It sounded like engines revving, followed by the crunch of tires on gravel. Ryan moved to the window, peering through the cracks in the boards nailed across it. Through the rain, he could see headlights cutting through the darkness. And not just one set. Multiple vehicles were pulling into the clearing near the cabin. "They found us," Ryan muttered, turning back to Linda and Daniel. "We need to move, now." Linda hesitated, torn between staying with Daniel and preparing to flee. "He's too weak to run," she protested. "We can't just leave him behind." "We don't have a choice," Ryan shot back, already grabbing. "They're makeshift supplies. If we stay, they'll take him again. Is that what you want?" "No," Linda snapped, anger flaring despite her fear. "But I won't let them hurt him either." Daniel struggled to sit up, his movements shaky, but determined. "I can try," he said quietly, meeting his mother's gaze. "I'll do whatever it takes." Linda nodded, swallowing hard. She helped Daniel to his feet, supporting most of his weight as they shuffled toward the back door. Ryan led the way, checking for any signs of danger before gesturing for them to follow. The rain was relentless, soaking them within seconds as they slipped into the woods. Ryan guided them along a narrow trail, moving as quickly as Daniel's condition allowed. Behind them, shouts echoed through the trees. Their pursuers were close. "They're gaining on us," Ryan called over his shoulder, his voice urgent. Linda tightened her grip on Daniel, urging him forward. "Keep going, sweetheart. Just a little farther." Suddenly, Daniel stopped, swaying slightly. His glowing eyes widened as he stared ahead, seemingly transfixed by something neither Linda nor Ryan could see. "Wait," he murmured, his voice trembling. "There's something out there." "What do you mean?" Linda asked, panic rising in her chest. Before Daniel could answer, a blinding light erupted from the trees, illuminating the entire area. A helicopter hovered above them, its searchlight sweeping the ground below. Voices crackled over a loudspeaker, commanding them to surrender. Ryan cursed under his breath, shielding his eyes from the glare. "This way," he shouted, veering off the path and deeper into the forest. Linda followed, half dragging Daniel as they stumbled through the underbrush. Just as they reached a steep embankment, Daniel suddenly froze. His body stiffened, and his glowing eyes brightened even more. Without warning, he pushed away from Linda and stepped forward, raising his hands toward the helicopter. "Daniel, no!" Linda screamed, reaching for him, but it was too late. A surge of energy pulsed from Daniel's palm, striking the helicopter with a deafening boom. The aircraft shuddered violently, its rotors sputtering before it veered off course and disappeared into the distance. Linda stared at her son in shock, unable to speak. Ryan looked equally stunned, though he recovered quickly. "That's new," he muttered, glancing at Daniel warily. Daniel lowered his hands, his expression a mix of awe and terror. I didn't mean to," he stammered. "I don't know how I did that." "We'll figure it out later," Ryan said firmly, snapping everyone back to reality. "Right now, we need to keep moving." They pressed on, eventually reaching a secluded road where Ryan had stashed a backup vehicle earlier. As they climbed into the car, Linda couldn't stop looking at Daniel. His glowing eyes dimmed slightly, but they still hinted at the changes within him. Changes she didn't fully understand, and wasn't sure she ever would. By the time they returned to Linda's house, dawn was breaking over Maplewood. The streets were eerily quiet, though red and blue lights flashed in the distance, signaling that authorities were closing in. Ryan parked the car a block away and turned to face them. "This isn't over," he warned, his tone serious. "Whoever's behind this, they're powerful. They won't stop until they get what they want." Linda nodded, clutching Daniel's hand tightly. "Then we'll fight. Together." For the first time since waking up, Daniel smiled faintly. "Yeah," he said, his voice stronger now. "Together." As the sun rose higher in the sky, the three of them prepared for the battle ahead. Whatever came next, they knew one thing for certain: they wouldn't face it alone.